line through the Apennine Mountains to Minturno, at the mouth of the Garigliano. The line was heavily fortified and hinged on the forbidding fortress abbey of Monte Cassino. The abbey commanded the entrance to the Liri Valley, the only major route through the mountains to Rome. The northern end of the Gustav Line was held by the 76th Panzer Corps, which consisted of 4 divisions. The southern end, including Monte Cassino, was held by the 14th Panzer Corps, which also consisted of 4 divisions. But it was in this sector that Kesselring expected the main Allied offensive to be launched. Here, he concentrated the bulk of his reserves, a further 4 divisions, to prevent any Allied breakthrough into the Liri Valley. Facing the 76th Corps, 8th Army had 5 divisions, but the line of advance was not promising, and 8th Army operations were to be scaled down in favour of the main effort, which would be mounted by Clark's 5th Army. For the assault on the Gustav Line, Clark deployed 2 British divisions, 3 American divisions, and 2 French divisions. He also secured the transfer of 2 divisions from 8th Army to his own. The 5th Division was slotted into the line on the left of the 56th, and the 2nd New Zealand was placed with the 45th Division in tactical reserve. Thus, massively reinforced, 5th Army would attack across the Garigliano River and its northern tributary, the Rapido, aiming to break into the Liri Valley and collapse the German defences south of Rome. The offensive was launched on January the 17th, but despite some small gains in the coastal sector by the British 5th and 56th Divisions, the main attack across the Rapido by the American 36th Division met much stiffer resistance. On the 21st, instead of reinforcing and exploiting the British bridgehead, Clark insisted priority be given to the American effort and ordered the 36th Division to renew its assault across the Rapido. While the Americans pressed their offensive against the Gustav Line, a force of 2 divisions, 1 British and 1 American, was embarking for the town of Anzio, 60 miles further up the coast, and only 30 miles from Rome. The landings at Anzio were intended to cut the lines of communication to the Gustav Line and prevent the Germans from conducting an orderly retreat. The troops went ashore on the 22nd, completely unopposed. German reserves had been called south to combat 5th Army's offensive, and there were virtually no German units for miles. Despite this, Clark instructed the commander of 6th Corps at Anzio to secure a strong beachhead before pushing inland, with the result that the element of surprise was lost, and the opportunity to win a significant victory in Italy was squandered. While 6th Corps consolidated its position and built up its supplies in the Anzio beachhead, Kesselring was ordering reserves to the area. Among the first to arrive were units of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division and the 4th Parachute Division, elite troops sent to block the main exits from the beachhead and seize control of the road and rail links between Rome and the Gustav Line. Within a few days, these would be joined by a further 6 divisions, some of them brought from as far away as France and Yugoslavia. Clark, meanwhile, had achieved little with his main offensive against the Gustav Line. In the first 2 days of the battle, the American 36th Division had lost nearly 2,000 men in repeated attempts to force a crossing of the lower Rapido. When this formation was exhausted, Clark ordered the 34th Division to attack higher up the river, hoping to take the town of Cassino and its abbey by flank envelopment. The abbey dominated the battlefield, and although not actually occupied by the Germans, possession of the hill itself and of other surrounding hills gave them a huge defensive advantage. German observation of Allied movements on the plain below was uninterrupted, and concentrated fire could be brought to bear on every attack. Once again, the American attack ran into a hail of fire, but by sheer perseverance they carved out a bridgehead on the far side of the Rapido and began pushing forward into the hills. The first battle of Cassino was to last until February the 10th. The Americans, supported on their right flank by the French, made several important gains. The bridgehead was consolidated, and several key hills were taken, although at the cost of a further 4,000 casualties. At Anzio, there was only sporadic fighting in the first week after the landings. Kesselring still lacked sufficient strength for a decisive counterstroke, and was wary of wasting what he had in small-scale, unprofitable engagements. While reserves were assembled for a full attack, he ordered the beachhead to be contained and the Allied build-up to be disrupted by long-range artillery and airstrikes against the invasion fleet. These were murderously effective. Despite considerable losses in aircraft, the Luftwaffe inflicted immense damage, sinking or seriously damaging several warships and numerous transports. By early February 1944, the Allies had achieved only a precarious lodgment, nowhere more than 10 miles deep, and centered on the main road leading from Anzio to Rome. The original 2 assault divisions of 6th Corps, however, were being rapidly reinforced by a further 3, one of them armoured, and despite the depredations of the Luftwaffe, the invasion fleet still possessed more than 20 major warships. Kesselring, by this time, had 4 divisions deployed in a defensive cordon, and 4 more assembling for an attack. On February the 7th, these were launched against a vulnerable salient created by the Allied thrust northwards. After heavy fighting, the Allies were driven back, but pausing briefly to reorganize, the Germans attacked again, driving straight down the road towards Anzio. On the first day, the Germans made good progress, punching a breach in the Allied lines 2 miles wide and a mile deep. The second day saw more modest gains as the Allies recovered and responded with local counterattacks supported by concentrated artillery and naval gunfire. The Germans pressed their offensive for a third day, but every fresh thrust was met by a deluge of shell fire and by determined fighting from the infantry. The line held, and on the 4th day, the Allies counterattacked vigorously, recovering some of the ground they had lost. But both sides were now exhausted, and both, in different ways, had suffered defeat. Although Kesselring's offensive had failed in its primary objective of driving the Allies back into the sea, It had badly shaken them and forced them back to inferior positions,